curiosity, first of all. I thought I would be motivated to try to understand Bitcoin if I actually invested some money in it, because I do believe the proposition that you don't really make genuine decisions if you're sampling a domain unless you have skin in the game, to use another cliche. And so I was curious on that front. I was curious about the idea of a decentralized ledger of accounts, and then curious also about the notion of competitive currencies, because as someone who regards the free market as an existential necessity, the idea that alternative currencies might be produced that could give the fiat currencies a run for their money, so to speak, that seemed to me to be attractive. And then I was also attracted by the revolutionary element of the idea, which makes it not humble in some sense, which is one of the things that worries me, because it looks to me like if the Bitcoin theorists are correct, and Bitcoin does take priority over the other cryptocurrencies, which, you know, we don't know if that's the case, but it could be, that could take the monetary system permanently out of the hands of the political establishment, or the political system. Yeah, so that's not humble, but it's also, as a social scientist, that also worries me, because, you know, when you do something complex, you think this is the problem with the central planning mentality. You know, you have this notion about how the world might be a better place, and so you do something complex, like change the basis of the currency, and you think, well, here's a whole bunch of good things that'll happen because of that, and you might be right about that, but there's going to be an immense number of things that happen as well that you didn't predict at all, and you have zero idea and zero evidence about whether those things will be positive or negative. And so this experiment that you're all running, I'm running, all the people who are involved in the cryptocurrency world are running, is like, well, okay, we're going to take money out of the hands of politicians, but that also means out of our hands as voting agents, right? Because it's not just politicians, that's you guys too. We have no idea what would happen if money per se was actually decentralized. And we also don't know, like, if we manage that, let's say Bitcoin attains primacy, is it irreversible? Like, is that permanent? And then you think, well, what if it's a bad idea and it's irreversible? I'm not saying it is, you know, and I'm not even saying I'm necessarily pessimistic about it, but the probability that you invent something extremely powerful and it only does the things you think it will do and all those things are good, it's like, no, that never happens. So
I appreciate the words of caution. I think, you know, sometimes in our enthusiasm, it can be easy to lose track of that we do need to heed caution for, you know, what might happen. If not in the long run, then at least in the short run, like, we're rattling some cages and you know, who knows what that's going to bring about.
That's for sure.
So I was curious to dig a little deeper into, like, how you look at this phenomenon of Bitcoin from your unique worldview perspective. And I wanted to read you a quote from that Bitcoin is Venice article, because I think it might link to something else you've said about Bitcoin. So the quote goes, quote, "Bitcoin may be magic internet money, but more importantly, it is money for the internet. Prior to 2009, you could send any information you wanted to anybody, anywhere in the world, instantly, except the most important information of all, value. Now we're all caught up." And then later, I heard you comment that maybe Bitcoin could be defined as an incorruptible language of value. So I'm curious, like, could you share a bit more, like, from your point of view, what does that mean?
Well, I don't think that's a particularly revolutionary observation on my part. That's the sort of thing that especially the real Bitcoin enthusiasts, the ones who are delving into the phenomenon from a philosophical or even a theological perspective, weirdly enough, are insisting, well, it's incorruptible because there is no central agent of control. I mean, I'm just bringing coals to Newcastle here. I mean, one of the things that all of you object to is the ability of central bankers to inflate the currency. And I do think you can make a pretty credible argument that you can interpret that as a form of theft. And I'm not saying it is, because that's complicated, right? I mean, in a free society like your society, and until recently mine, yeah, I wish that was funny. You know, the people who are managing the monetary supply are elected, and that means that we do have control over the process, or at least as much control as any of us have over any political processes, and we're gonna take that away. Now, the argument is that, well, we should take that away because money's a ledger. You know, it's an exchange of labor. It's an exchange of productivity. It's an exchange of value. That's a better way of thinking about it. It's a way of tracking the exchange of value between individuals. And it isn't obvious that once you and I enter into a contract of value, that a third party should be able to alter the means by which we track that exchange for their purposes, whatever those purposes are. And again, I think that's a rational argument, but that doesn't mean it's right. These are very, very complicated issues. I mean, most of us assume that taxation is acceptable, or at least we don't, you know, strike up the revolution because it occurs. We seem to think that there is a role for government and for the determinations that government make outside the free market per se. Obviously, the government has to exercise some control over currency, over money, in order to make its functions possible. If we take the control of currency away from the government, we don't know what that'll do, for example, to taxation. You know, if we could all of a sudden do all of our transactions in secrecy, like in real secrecy.
Well, you could argue the world was on a gold standard, and that limited the control of governments over money, and still taxation existed for many hundreds of years.
Fair enough, you know. I guess what I would point to from the devil's advocate perspective is that, well, we shifted away from the gold standard in the 70s, and, you know, all hell hasn't broken loose. Now, I do accept the proposition that currencies have inflated, and perhaps in a counterproductive manner, but the last 60 years have been pretty damn productive economically, and so that system did work. Now, you could say, well, it could have worked better. It's like, yeah, maybe, but it certainly could have worked a hell of a lot worse. And so, well, this isn't a criticism of Bitcoin. It's just, I mean, I've watched over the years as social scientists have tried to mount large-scale social experiments with the best of intentions, and you know, generally, almost invariably, that doesn't work.
So are you cautioning to maybe not throw the baby away with the bathwater, like how, you know, I guess with the Reformation, the revolt against Catholicism, that, you know, huge changes happened, or you know, in the Napoleonic era, huge changes happened, and people seem to blanketly wanting to delete entire institutions. Is that what you're cautioning for?
Well, you know, maybe things are unfolding. I'm not really suggesting that you do anything as a consequence of this caution. I'm just saying that, you know, unbridled enthusiasm predicated on the assumption that your new system will only do the good things you think it will do, that's not wise. That isn't what'll happen. Now, this currency revolution might be proceeding in as positive a manner as we could expect, because at the moment what we have is, in some sense, unbridled competition between a variety of currencies. I mean, we had that before, because you could hold currency from different countries, and that was analogous in some sense, and so that possibility existed before. But you have the cryptocurrencies now, and they're competing with fiat currencies, and maybe that's the right way to settle which one is more valid, is to let the competition proceed apace and let a multitude of people make their free choice and, you know, accept the emergent winner as the valid winner.
Right.
And since I believe the market is the only way of making those sorts of calculations, then that seems like a fair approach.